Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it is the middle of January. It's actually kind of like towards the end of January, but it is cold out. It has been snowing on and off all week throughout New York, and it's just gonna get colder through February. So I think it's time to do another video on great winter horror reads. Now I want to put a little asterisk next to great because these are books that I think the atmosphere in the book is great. There are some books on here that I didn't necessarily love, but I wanted to put on this list because I do think that they really capture kind of like cabin fever when it's cold outside and you're trapped and it's snowing and you have no electricity, just winter in general, snowstorms, the mountains, being cold. It captures the fear and the feeling of and so I have a lot of books here. I did this video once before, I think like 2 years ago, and I talk about some of the more like giants in winter horror. So I definitely have a few more this time that are a little more indie, and a lot are actually recent releases. Some are actually books that I just finished reading because they are the books that I want to read during the winter. I love reading winter books during the winter, and I don't like reading winter books when it's not winter, so I kind of pack them all together for January and February, and that's when I read them. So I'm here to share them with you. So first up, I will be doing a full in-depth deep dive review on this book because I just finished it, but I do have to include Dead of Winter on this list because the entire thing is set basically during a blizzard in the Rocky Mountains. The atmosphere in this novel is absolutely phenomenal and scary, and Darcy Coates is really leaning more into the horror side of her cozy horror, which I was very intrigued by. This book isn't really cozy at all, but I don't want to do a full review on this because that should be my next video up, deep dive in that, so definitely be on the lookout. But I'm going to read the little back for y'all. When Krista joins a tour group heading deep into the Rocky Mountains, she's hopeful this will be her chance to put the ghost of her past to rest. But when a bitterly cold snowstorm sweeps the region, the small group is forced to take shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. Despite the uncomfortably claustrophobic quarters and rapidly dropping temperature, Krista believes they'll be safe as they wait out the storm. She couldn't be more wrong. Deep in the night, their tour guide goes missing, only to be discovered the following morning, his severed head impaled on a tree outside the cabin. Terrified and completely isolated by the storm, Krista finds herself trapped with 8 total strangers. One of them kills for sport, and they're far from finished. As the storm grows more dangerous and the number of survivors dwindles one by one, Krista must decide whom she can trust before this frozen mountain becomes her tomb. If you are fans of the show Yellow Jackets, especially like the flashback scenes, if you like The Shining, you're going to probably enjoy the atmosphere of this book. It is so good at creating just an isolation due to the elements, and snow and the snowstorms and the freezing cold and trying to find heat and warmth are so imperative with this book that I really loved this kind of snowy isolation horror. Very fun. It's a read that will make you feel cold. Next up, A Cold Place for Dying by Christopher Triana. This is actually the first work of Triana's that I ever read. Got it in a Nightworms package like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, maybe. I don't actually remember. I'd never heard of this author before, but I got it, I believe I think I got it in a December package. And I was like, cool, blustery, cold, let's read it. To be perfectly honest, I do not know where you can get this. I know that this was like an exclusive Nightworms printing. Triana might sell it on his website. It's got like another like mini short story in it. I guess it's almost 200 pages, so it's like kind of a novella. But this is really fun, and it's set on Christmas Eve, so it's technically kind of Christmas horror too if you're interested, but it's not really Christmas-y, so keep that in mind. It can be read at all times of the year. It's Christmas Eve. Having lost his wife, Joe Whitaker is spending the day hunting deer with bow and arrow in the mountains of New England. He finds a sense of peace getting back to nature, and even leaves his phone in his truck, wanting to free himself from the everyday world for a few hours. But no sooner does he enter the woods than his peace is interrupted by Nicole, a frantic woman running barefoot through the snow. She claims she was kidnapped and has managed to escape. The man who has imprisoned her is now on her tail and won't stop until she's his hostage again. Joe wants to help Nicole, but when he comes across Dan, the man pursuing her, he's told Nicole has a serious mental illness and is delusional. Dan claims he isn't her kidnapper. He's her husband. As a snowstorm bears down on the mountain, Joe soon finds himself in a deadly triangle with a mysterious man and a panicked woman, not knowing who to trust. If he makes the wrong choice, it might just cost him his life. Okay, so if you're a Christopher Triana fan, be warned. This is like the least extreme thing I have ever written from him. It's kind of almost like wholesome for Triana. But it is snowy. It is wintry. It is set in the woods. And I had a lot of fun with it. It is a nice little, like, I said slice of life in my last video, so I don't want to say it again, but it is very much a, like, slice of life piece that just happens to be in a wintry background. It's a very quick and easy read. But if you've ever been interested in reading Christopher Triana's work and you're kind of intimidated by how extreme he can be, this is a great place to start because it is, again, the least extreme thing that I have read from him, and it is also the book that convinced me to keep reading his work, so take that for granted. And I love the cover, which is snow. Okay, next up, my last video was a whole in-depth review on this, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but this is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a sequel in a trilogy, so if you have not read My Heart is a Chainsaw, you probably can't read this. The reason I included this, though, is because I found this to be absolutely fantastic, atmospheric, snowed in a hometown horror. Like, cut off from the rest of civilization, just you and your town, the snowplows can't get through, with situational horror. The horror obviously being slashing. I am not going to read the inside of this just because it is a sequel, but the reason I'm going to talk about it is because I'm going to kind of recommend both books. If you read My Heart is a Chainsaw, that is a great summer horror read. It is set primarily on July 4th, so you kind of get a lot of, like, the summer cliches that we see in summer horror movies, you know? And it's a slasher as well, so it's going to pay nods to things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and all of that jazz. Jaws is a big factor in that book. This one doesn't necessarily focus on, like, winter horror movies, but again, the setting of this story is absolutely superb. The way that it changes the landscape from book 1 to book 2, even though they are both set in the exact same setting, is incredible. I love the usage of the lake in the summer being obviously uncrossable unless by boat or plane, and then in the winter you can just ski across it because it's frozen solid. Winter and snow and a blizzard really increase the horror and increase the stakes in this book, and it's just an absolutely fabulous atmospheric read if you are looking for not only, like, winter horror, but to an extent survival horror in snowy settings. So I do really enjoy that book. I really highly recommend that series. Book 3 will be out very soon. But I love the juxtaposition between book 1 and book 2 because it can be read very seasonally and it makes a lot of sense when you do that. Okay, next up. So I'm putting this on the list for the atmosphere. This is Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. This is a book I was so overjoyed to read. This is a book I had been waiting like a year and a half, 2 years to get my hands on. I read it, like, I started reading it the day it showed up in my mailbox. This is a very polarizing book. And I like Philip Fracassi as a writer. I really do. But I feel like this book missed a lot of things for me. That being said, the setting in this book is brilliant. It's brilliant. And I think that is very well done. And again, similar to Don't Fear the Reaper, a lot of the horror comes from the isolation of being snowed in and cut off. I'm going to read the inside flap for y'all. St. Vincent's Orphanage for Boys. Early 20th century in a remote valley in Pennsylvania. Here, under the watchful eyes of several priests, 32 boys work, learn, and worship. Peter Barlow, orphaned as a child by a gruesome murder, has made a new life here. As he approaches adulthood, he has friends, a future, a family. Then, late one stormy night, a group of men arrive at their door. one of whom is badly wounded, occult symbols carved into his flesh. His death releases an ancient evil that spreads like sickness, infecting St. Vincent's and the children within. Soon, boys begin acting differently, forming groups, taking sides. Others turn up dead. Now Peter and those dear to him must choose sides of their own, each of them knowing their lives and perhaps their eternal souls are at risk. I don't want to talk about the things I don't like about this book, because so many people that I love and respect in the horror lit book reviewing community adored this book. I am not sure why, but so many people did that there is some kind of substance to this book, some subjective part of it that I am missing and did not enjoy. The setting I absolutely loved. I loved this concept of children without proper modern communications. Again, I think it's set in like 1900. Trapped in a snowstorm, miles away from an actual town, miles away from like civilization as we know it. Horrible things are happening inside and they can't escape due to the cold, brutal blizzard that is trapping them. Loved that. I loved that. I loved that. I loved that. It added and elevated the stakes. Winter is such a fun thing to do because it really does make everything just that much harder. And I wanted to love this. I really, really did, especially after reading Child Alone with Strangers by Philip Fracassi, which I just adored that book. Had high hopes for this, and this is definitely going to be a polarizing read. It's also going to be a polarizing read because it has polar temperatures. But no, it is, if you're looking for something atmospheric, this definitely has that part covered at least. And I never want to discourage anybody from reading a book just because I didn't like it, because there are so many authors that I don't like that other people love and think I'm crazy for not liking. So always want to give you guys all of the options. Obviously, I still own this book. I haven't unhauled it, which means that to me, it is still worth keeping because I do really like Fracassi's writing in general. This is another book that kind of fits into that area that Boys in the Valley does, where I don't necessarily know if I love this book, but the atmosphere and the setting of this book, amazing. So this is Never Rest by T.L. Bodine. I like to call this book What I Wanted Echo by Thomas Hoyvelt to be, because anything would have been better than what it actually was. But again, this is another tale of somebody who attempts to climb a very large mountain and gets lost, just like in Echo, and their loved one goes searching for them for some reason. In Echo, I really couldn't quite tell you what happened in that book, but at least in this one, I can. I'm going to read the inside flap. 1 year ago, Sean Miller, journalist and mountain climbing enthusiast, reached the summit of Mount Everest and was never seen again. Unable to move on without knowing the truth of what happened, his widow Carrie insists on an expedition to search for Sean's body, so he can be properly laid to rest. Tom, Sean's best friend and former climbing partner, agrees to serve as expedition guide and promises to keep Carrie safe on the mountain, despite their complicated relationship history. Guided by a travel journal left behind by her husband, Carrie ventures into the frozen open-air graveyard of the world's tallest peak. But as Sean's diary and Carrie's experiences reveal, climbing the mountain is more than a test of endurance. It's a battle of wills with an ancient and hostile force protecting the mountain, and the dead do not rest easy at the summit. Here's what's cool about this book. If you have any interest in mountain climbing and everything that goes into mountain climbing, especially something like venturing up Everest, this book does an amazing job of laying out how actually difficult that is. I feel like we just think like, oh, it's cold, oh, it's tall. There's so much that goes into climbing a mountain like that I didn't know about. The acclimation, these mini climbs, all of the different camps that you have to get to, and it really goes through all of that. The journals that Sean has basically documenting his experience, for me, were the best part of this book, because you really felt like you were with an actual mountain climber. It really nails the atmosphere of being with a group of people, because it's not an isolation story, on a mountain and just trying to reach your goal. Obviously, there are horror elements or minor supernatural elements, which honestly I don't even think needed to be in the story, but they're there. But this is a really good glimpse into mountain climbing. So if that is something that you were interested in and that is something that you have wanted to read more about, this is a really good book for that. I don't think I necessarily like the characters in this story. I don't necessarily think I actually care about the story, but reading about the actual journey from two different perspectives of people climbing up the same mountain, I absolutely loved. I thought it was really, really cool, very well researched, made me feel cold, made me feel how difficult it was, made me understand mountain climbing a hell of a lot more than I initially did, and I really appreciate it for that. And I also this is a Twisted Retreat cover. I say this every time I talk about this book. I love this cover. I think they did such a great job, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful book. But yes, if you were disappointed in Echo, like I was, this is a better version of a very similar story with a less confusing ending. Still kind of confusing, still kind of weird and supernatural towards the end, but like more palatable by miles. Okay, I have 2 more books for y'all. I also just recently read this and did a whole review on that, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but this is The Drift by C.J. Tudor. I really enjoy C.J. Tudor's writing. I know some people don't. I think some people think that she goes a little bit too far, and she does tend to have those moments in her books where she just kind of does something gratuitous for absolutely no reason. Unlike somebody like Christopher Triana, where his consistent gratuitous gore and horror adds a lot to the story. Hers are just kind of there for shock value, and it feels kind of cheap. But beyond that, I tend to really enjoy her writing. She pays a lot of homage to Stephen King, and she writes in a very easy to read, easy to approach tone. This was a different one for her because this really was kind of 3 stories in one. It's told through the perspectives of 3 different main characters, and you have to kind of figure out how they're all associated. But the entire thing is set during like a blizzard. So I'm going to read the book. I'm going to read the inside flap. Hannah awakens to carnage, all mangled metal and shattered glass. After she was evacuated from a secluded boarding school during a snowstorm, her coach careered off the road, trapping her with a handful of survivors. They'll need to work together to escape, with their sanity and secrets intact. Meg awakens to a gentle rocking. She's in a cable car stranded high above snowy mountains, with 5 strangers and no memory of how they got on board. They are heading to a place known only as the Retreat. But as the temperature drops and the tensions mount, Meg realizes they may not all make it there alive. Carter is gazing out the window of an isolated ski chalet he and his companions call home. As their generator begins to waver in the storm, something hiding in the chalet's depths threatens to escape, and their fragile bonds will be tested when the power finally fails for good. The imminent dangers faced by Hannah, Meg, and Carter are each one part of the puzzle. Lurking in their shadows is an even greater danger, one with the power to consume all of humanity. I love this as separately survival, winter horror, isolation, winter horror. It does a very, very good job of balancing all of those. Carter's storyline and Hannah's storyline definitely, I think, do it the most. Hannah's is definitely survivalist and Carter's is definitely isolation. But I enjoyed Meg's because to me Meg's was the scariest because the idea of being stuck in a frozen cable car in the middle of winter that you can't jump down from is so mind-bogglingly terrifying to me. And even though they're all kind of similar premises and it's all people just stuck together in a snowstorm, I felt that the story did an amazing job of having completely different reactions and outcomes for all of the story, so it didn't feel like it was redundant at any point for me. So you get kind of 3 different angles of really cool winter horror where the snow setting is what's so pivotal to the driving factors of every single situation, and I really, really loved that. Again, I have a whole review on that book, so if you're definitely interested in reading something, go listen to that because I really do a deep dive into what I loved about that novel. Okay, and last but not least, this is probably the most unique one that I have on this list, but we have Road of Bones by Christopher Golden. I am starting to really love Christopher Golden. His novel All Hallows came out last year and I devoured that. It made it into my top 10 of 2023 list, and he has a new book coming out in like a week, I think, that I will be reading. I'm very excited about that. But this was my introduction to him. I'd never heard of him before. I loved this cover and I really liked the premise, so I'm going to read that to you guys right now. Surrounded by barren trees in a snow-covered wilderness with a dim, dusky sky forever overhead, Siberia's Kolyma Highway is 1,200 miles of gravel-packed permafrost within driving distance of the Arctic Circle. A narrow path where drivers face such challenging conditions as icy surfaces, limited visibility, and an average temperature of 60 degrees below zero. Fatal car crashes are common. But motorists are not the only victims of the highway. Known as the Road of Bones is a massive graveyard for the former Soviet Union's Gulag prisoners. Hundreds of thousands of people were worked to death and left where their bodies fell, consumed by the frozen elements and plowed beneath the road. Fascinated by the history, documentary producer Felix Teiglund is in Russia to drive the highway, envisioning a new series capturing life and death on the Road of Bones with a ride to the town of Okhust, I hope I said that right, the coldest place on Earth, collecting ghost stories and local legends along the way. However, when Teig and his team reach their destination, they find an abandoned town, save one catatonic 9-year-old girl and a pack of predatory wolves, faster and smarter than any wild animals should be. Pursued by the otherworldly beasts, Teig's companions confront even more uncanny and inexplicable phenomenon along the Road of Bones, as if the ghosts of Stalin's victims were haunting them. It is a harrowing journey that will push Teig to the edge of human endurance. I really enjoyed this book because I think it took the idea of kind of like winter isolation horror and raised the stakes by dropping the temperatures drastically, really choosing an interesting setting, and putting a lot of horror into kind of a very intriguing, I don't want to say car chase, but like car experience, while also sort of doing like the documentary thing. It's not found footage, but it does have the documentary angle on things, which I tend to really like in horror. I think it's a fun thing to add, that kind of element of like the, not breaking the fourth wall, but like characters are doing things for the camera. And I just really, really enjoyed this. Again, this is the book that convinced me to read more from Christopher Golden. I do like All Hallows more, but I was really impressed with this book. It's very, very short. It's only like 200 pages. But I really liked the originality of the setting, the choice of doing the documentary, the supernatural elements mixed with like the Siberian folklore, and the Road of Bones is a real place, so that was really, really cool. And again, winter and the cold clearly plays a very, very, very heavy part of the storyline, but it doesn't depend on it. There's so many other extra elements that I think really elevate the story and make it very cool and very unique, and so I did really, really enjoy that. Anyways, I definitely have some more like wintry horror books that I'm going to be reading over the next couple of weeks, so I will be doing reviews on those on my channel, but I definitely wanted to share these 7 books with you. Ugh, sirens. So you guys have those. If I had to pick one that I probably recommended the most, probably go with The Drift right now, just because I really love how it hits all snowy angles. And for most original, it's definitely going to be Road of Bones, just because it's such a unique concept on a kind of horror trope that has been done, as you can see, many, many, many times. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah!